Seraphina, with the typical resistance of a 4-year-old on a perfect beach day. Reluctantly obeyed, running towards Maria, her small feet kicking up sand. Maria, momentarily distracted by a text message from her ailing mother, looked away for a fleeting moment, a lapse in concentration that would forever haunt her. When she looked back, the space where Seraphina had been was empty. The pink swimsuit, a vibrant splash of color against the pale sand, was gone. Panic, a cold, insidious dread began to coil in Mariah's stomach. Before we continue, subscribe for more dope and unforgettable stories like this. Don't forget to like, comment, and share so others get to watch too. Now back to the story. In the opulent, sun-drenched world of South Florida, where the Atlantic's azure embrace met pristine white sands, lived Elijah Vance, a titan of industry whose name echoed through the hallowed halls of global finance. Vance, a man forged in the fires of ambition and relentless drive, possessed a mind as sharp as a newly honed blade and a will as unyielding as granite. His skin, a rich dark mahogany, gleamed under the perpetual Florida sun, and his eyes, deep-set and piercing, held the gaze of a man who had seen the world and bent it to his will. He stood tall, with a regal bearing that spoke of inherited wealth and self-made power, his silver-streaked hair a testament to the years he had dedicated to building his empire. Yet for all his monumental success, Elijah Vance was, at his core, a man haunted by a singular, profound loss. His empire, Vance Global, was a sprawling conglomerate of tech innovations, luxury resorts, and philanthropic endeavors, each facet meticulously crafted to reflect his vision of a better world. But even the gilded cage of immense wealth could not shield him from the cruel hand of fate. His only daughter, the vibrant, quick-witted Simone Vance, had passed away tragically young, leaving behind a void that no amount of success could ever fill. Her memory, a bittersweet ache in his heart, was personified in her daughter, Seraphina. Elijah's beacon, his last tangible link to the daughter he had lost. Seraphina, with her playful spirit and eyes that mirrored the sparkling ocean, was the spitting image of Simone, a living echo of youthful exuberance and boundless potential. She was a child of joy, her laughter a melody that resonated through the Grand Vance estate, bringing a fleeting solace to Elijah's often somber world. Seraphina, at just 4 years old, was a whirlwind of curiosity and untamed energy, her tiny frame belying a spirit as vast as the ocean her grandfather owned. Her skin, a lighter shade of brown than her grandfather's, seemed to absorb the sunlight, giving her an almost luminous quality. Her hair, a cascade of tightly coiled curls, often escaped its ribbons, framing a face dominated by large, intelligent eyes that sparkled with an insatiable wonder. The day it happened, the air hung heavy with the promise of a perfect Florida summer day. The sky was a canvas of endless blue, dotted with a few wispy clouds that drifted lazily towards the horizon. The ocean, a hypnotic rhythm of crashing waves, beckoned with its cool embrace. It was a day designed for carefree moments, for building sandcastles and chasing the retreating tide. The Vance family, in their vast, secluded beach estate, had gathered for what should have been a day of unadulterated joy. Maria, Seraphina's nanny, a woman whose gentle hands and warm smile had nurtured countless children, watched over the little girl with an unwavering devotion. Maria, a woman in her late 40s, had a comforting presence, her dark skin radiating warmth, her short, neatly braided hair framing a face etched with kindness and a quiet strength. Her uniform, crisp and white, spoke of her professionalism. But it was her eyes, soft and perpetually concerned, that truly revealed the depth of her affection for Seraphina. Seraphina, dressed in a vibrant pink swimsuit adorned with playful flamingos, was a blur of motion. Her squeals of delight carried on the gentle sea breeze as she chased after sanderlings at the water's edge. Elijah, usually cloistered in his study, had made an exception for Seraphina. He watched her from a distance, a rare, soft smile playing on his lips, a stark contrast to his usual stoic demeanor. He found a quiet contentment in her presence, a reprieve from the relentless demands of his empire. The sun, A golden orb in the sky cast long shadows as the afternoon wore on. Maria, ever vigilant, noticed a slight chill in the air and called Seraphina back, urging her to put on her cover-up. Seraphina, with the typical resistance of a 4-year-old on a perfect beach day, reluctantly obeyed, running towards Maria, her small feet kicking up sand. Maria, momentarily distracted by a text message from her ailing mother, looked away for a fleeting moment, a lapse in concentration that would forever haunt her. When she looked back, the space where Seraphina had been was empty. The pink swimsuit, a vibrant splash of color against the pale sand, was gone. Panic, a cold, insidious dread began to coil in Mariah's stomach. She called out Seraphina's name, her voice trembling at first, then rising to a desperate crescendo. The rhythmic roar of the ocean seemed to mock her, swallowing her cries. Elijah, alerted by Mariah's increasingly frantic shouts, felt an icy grip tighten around his heart. He rushed to her side, his powerful frame suddenly feeling strangely vulnerable. The serene beach, moments ago a picture of tranquility, transformed into a terrifying void. The air, once filled with the gentle lapping of waves, now echoed only with the rising tide of their terror. A frantic search began. Estate security, a small army of highly trained individuals, fanned out across the beach, their flashlights cutting through the deepening twilight. The local police were immediately alerted, their sirens wailing in the distance, a mournful dirge that punctuated the growing despair. Coast Guard vessels, their powerful searchlights sweeping the dark expanse of the ocean, joined the desperate effort. The media, vultures drawn to the scent of tragedy, descended upon the Vance estate like a swarm of locusts, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust forward, eager to capture every raw moment of the billionaire's anguish. The story, a gripping tale of a missing child, from one of the nation's most prominent families, spread like wildfire across news channels and social media platforms. The world watched breathlessly as the search intensified, hope dwindling with each passing hour. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, and still, there was no trace of Seraphina. The once vibrant pink swimsuit, a symbol of her innocent joy, became a phantom image, a cruel reminder of what was lost. The ocean, once a source of serene beauty, now seemed to mock them with its vast, indifferent silence, holding its secrets close. Elijah Vance, a man accustomed to wielding immense power and control, found himself utterly helpless, adrift in a sea of grief. His usually immaculate suits seemed to hang loosely on his once imposing frame. His shoulders slumped under the crushing weight of his sorrow. The light in his eyes, once so sharp and resolute, had dulled, replaced by a haunting emptiness. He poured millions into private investigations, hired the best detectives money could buy, but every lead, every whisper of hope led to a dead end. His empire, once his passion, became a mere distraction, a monument to a hollow victory. He often found himself staring out at the ocean from his sprawling estate, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if he could somehow conjure her back from the depths. The rhythmic crash of the waves, once a soothing lullaby, now sounded like a relentless, mocking whisper of loss. The beach, once a playground of happy memories, became a graveyard of his deepest fears. Maria, consumed by guilt, resigned from her position, her heart shattered by the tragedy she felt responsible for. She vanished quietly, a shadow of her former self, unable to bear the weight of her perceived failure. Her last conversation with Elijah was brief, filled with tears and unspoken apologies. He had tried to reassure her, to tell her it wasn't her fault, but her grief was too profound to be assuaged by words. 2 decades passed, a relentless march of time that carved deeper lines into Elijah Vance's face and further solidified the icy grip of his grief. The world had moved on. The sensational story of Seraphina's disappearance, fading into the annals of unsolved mysteries. A grim footnote in the Vance legacy, but for Elijah, time had stood still. He lived in a perpetual twilight of remembrance, the ghost of Seraphina a constant companion. His philanthropic efforts intensified, perhaps a subconscious attempt to fill the void to bring light into a world that felt perpetually dim. He funded children's hospitals, built schools in underserved communities, and invested in programs for missing persons. His fortune now largely dedicated to preventing others from experiencing the same devastating loss, yet none of it truly eased the aching emptiness in his soul. He had become a recluse, his public appearances rare, his eyes still holding that distant, haunted look. The vast estate, once alive with Seraphina's laughter, was now a silent mausoleum of memories. The air, once vibrant, was heavy with unspoken grief. He often walked the desolate stretch of beach where she had vanished, his footsteps leaving solitary imprints in the sand, his mind replaying those final, sun-drenched moments. He would stand there for hours, a lonely figure silhouetted against the setting sun, a testament to enduring sorrow. Meanwhile, miles away, in the gritty, pulsating heart of a vibrant urban landscape, a different kind of life unfolded. Aisha, a young woman with a spirit as resilient as the city itself, navigated the unforgiving streets, her voice her only sanctuary. Aisha, with her deep, resonant voice that could evoke both profound sorrow and soaring joy, was a street performer, her stage the bustling sidewalks, her audience the indifferent throngs of passers-by. Her skin, a warm caramel hue, glowed even in the dim streetlights, and her long, intricately braided hair cascaded down her back, often adorned with colorful beads she had found or traded for. Her clothes were simple, worn but clean, reflecting a life of struggle but also of self-respect. Her eyes, large and expressive, held a depth that belied her years, a quiet wisdom born from hardship and observation. She played a battered acoustic guitar, its worn fretboard a testament to countless hours of practice, its melodies a balm to her often troubled soul. Music was her escape, her language, her shield against the harsh realities of her existence. She lived hand to mouth, performing for meager tips, often going hungry, yet her spirit remained unbroken. Aisha had no memory of a life before the streets. Her earliest recollections were fragmented, hazy images of fleeting kindness and moments of profound loneliness. She had been raised in a series of foster homes, each one a temporary haven, none a true home. She had learned early on that survival depended on her wits, her resilience, and the captivating power of her voice. She had an uncanny ability to read people, to understand their unspoken desires, their hidden pains, and to weave them into her melodies. Her songs were raw, honest expressions of life on the margins, infused with a soulful depth that resonated with those who paused to listen. She sang of lost dreams, of enduring hope, of the unwavering power of love, even in the face of despair. Her voice, a powerful instrument, was her lifeline, her identity. She dreamed of a life beyond the concrete jungle, a life where her music could truly soar, where she could finally find a sense of belonging. She carried a quiet longing within her, a yearning for something she couldn't quite name, a persistent feeling of being untethered, unconnected. She often felt a strange, inexplicable pull towards the ocean, a sense of familiarity she couldn't explain, a whisper of memories that refused to fully materialize. It was a yearning that often manifested in her music, a melancholic undertone that laced even her most upbeat melodies. On a particularly sweltering afternoon, a symphony of urban noise filled the air, the blare of car horns, the distant wail of sirens, the ceaseless chatter of the crowd. Aisha, feeling a familiar pang of hunger, set up her makeshift stage near a bustling plaza, the worn leather of her guitar strap digging into her shoulder. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began to play. The melody that flowed from her fingertips was hauntingly familiar. A lullaby she had never consciously learned, yet it resonated deep within her soul. It was a tune of innocence and loss, of bittersweet memories and enduring hope. Her voice, a rich, velvety alto, filled the air, weaving a spell that momentarily silenced the urban clamor. She sang of a love lost, of a child's laughter, of the vast, indifferent ocean, her eyes closed, lost in the music. It was a song that seemed to carry the weight of an untold story, a melody that spoke of profound longing and a quiet, persistent hope. Miles away, Elijah Vance, his face a mask of weary resignation, found himself walking through the very plaza where Aisha sang. He was en route to a rare public engagement, a philanthropic gala he felt obligated to attend. His mind, as always, was miles away, lost in the labyrinth of his grief. He walked with a heavy gait, his gaze fixed on the ground, oblivious to the vibrant tapestry of city life unfolding around him. The noise of the city, usually an irritant, was a dull hum in his ears, overshadowed by the constant drone of his sorrow. He was a man adrift, a phantom moving through the world, disconnected from its vibrant pulse. Then, through the cacophony of the city, a single, clear note pierced the veil of his despair. It was a melody, ethereal and achingly familiar, a whisper from a distant past. He paused, his head tilting almost imperceptibly, his brow furrowing in a mixture of confusion and recognition. The notes, carried on the humid air, tugged at a forgotten chord deep within his heart. He felt an inexplicable pull, an unseen force drawing him towards the source of the music. As he drew closer, the voice became clearer, more resonant, a voice that seemed to echo with a profound, almost primal familiarity. He pushed through the indifferent crowd, his eyes scanning for the source of this captivating sound. And then he saw her, Aisha, her eyes closed, her fingers dancing on the guitar strings, her voice soaring with an almost otherworldly beauty. Her song, a melancholic ode to a child's laughter and the vast, indifferent ocean, sent a shiver down his spine. It was the lullaby, the very same lullaby he had sung to Seraphina countless times, a melody that had been composed by his late daughter Simone, a private, cherished melody that only their family knew, a song that Seraphina adored, a song that was intrinsically linked to her. His breath caught in his throat. His heart, long dormant, began to pound with a frantic, desperate rhythm. It was impossible, he told himself, a mere coincidence. Yet, the melody was undeniably hers. The voice, though matured, held a resonance that stirred a profound, almost painful familiarity within him. He stood frozen, transfixed, the bustling plaza fading into an ethereal haze. The world, for a fleeting moment, narrowed to this young woman, her song, and the sudden, overwhelming rush of a past he had thought buried forever. The melody, once a gentle comfort, was now a potent, agonizing key, unlocking chambers of memory he had long sealed away. He felt a tremor run through his entire body, a sensation he hadn't experienced in 2 decades. Hope, a fragile, almost forgotten emotion, began to flicker within the cavern of his heart, a tiny, defiant spark in the vast darkness of his despair. He couldn't tear his gaze away from Aisha, his mind racing, trying to reconcile the impossible. Could it be? Could this be the miracle he had stopped daring to dream of? The questions swirled in his mind, a tumultuous torrent of disbelief and desperate longing. He watched her for what felt like an eternity, his mind battling the rational and the impossible. The song ended, the final note lingering in the air like a fragile prayer. Aisha opened her eyes, her gaze sweeping over the small crowd that had gathered. Her eyes, large and dark, met Elijah's. For a fleeting moment, a spark of recognition, a flicker of something ancient and profound passed between them. It was a silent acknowledgement, a premonition of a destiny long delayed. Elijah, driven by an instinct he couldn't articulate, pushed forward, his voice a hoarse whisper. "That song," he managed, his throat tight with emotion. "Where did you learn that song?" Aisha, startled by the intensity in his eyes, hesitated. She had never been approached like this, never seen such raw, unadulterated emotion on a stranger's face. She instinctively clutched her guitar closer, a defensive gesture. It's just a song," she replied, her voice soft, slightly wary. "It came to me." Elijah shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "No, that song, it's mine. It's my daughter's song. My granddaughter's song." His voice cracked with emotion. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the unusual scene unfolding before them. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. curious glances darting between the impeccably dressed billionaire and the humble street performer. Aisha's brow furrowed in confusion, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "I don't understand," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. "I've always known this song. It feels like it's a part of me. A fresh wave of hope, mingled with a terrifying fear of disappointment, washed over Elijah. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that this was no mere coincidence. The melody, the voice, the inexplicable pull he felt towards her, it was all too profound, too specific. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card, his hand trembling slightly. "Please," he urged, his voice filled with a desperate plea. "Come to my office, tomorrow. We need to talk. I think you might be my granddaughter." Aisha stared at the card, then back at Elijah, her mind reeling. The words hung in the air. Audacious and unbelievable. A billionaire claiming her as his granddaughter? It sounded like a cruel joke. A fantastical tale spun by a street corner prophet. Her life had been a relentless struggle, a testament to hardship and perseverance. The idea of such an extraordinary lineage was too far-fetched, too fantastical to comprehend. Yet there was something in his eyes. A profound sorrow, a desperate hope, that resonated with a hidden part of her, a part that yearned for connection, for belonging. She looked at the card again, the Vance Global logo gleaming in the afternoon sun, a symbol of immense power and influence. It was real. This man, this undeniable force, believed she was his missing granddaughter. The thought sent a jolt through her, a mixture of fear and a strange, thrilling anticipation. Could it be true? Could the fragmented memories, the inexplicable yearning for something more, finally find their explanation? The possibility, however remote, was enough to ignite a fragile spark of hope within her. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay," she said, her eyes still wide with disbelief. "Tomorrow." The word hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken possibilities, with the promise of a past unearthed, a future irrevocably altered. Elijah, a man who rarely showed emotion, felt a surge of relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. He managed a shaky smile, a genuine expression of hope that had been absent from his face for 2 long decades. He knew this was just the beginning, that the road ahead would be fraught with uncertainty and potential heartbreak. But for the first time in 20 years, he felt a flicker of light pierce the impenetrable darkness of his grief. He turned and walked away, his steps lighter, a newfound sense of purpose in his stride. Aisha watched him go, the business card clutched tightly in her hand, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Her life, moments ago a predictable tapestry of struggle and song, had just been irrevocably torn open, revealing a chasm of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. The street, her familiar stage, suddenly felt unfamiliar, imbued with the echoes of a past she was about to confront. The melody, the very melody that had drawn Elijah to her, now pulsed in her veins, a haunting, beautiful secret waiting to be fully revealed. The suspense was palpable, the anticipation almost unbearable. Her life was about to change forever, and she knew, deep in her heart, that nothing would ever be the same. The question lingered. A silent symphony in the urban hum. Was this the beginning of a joyous reunion, or a cruel twist of fate? Only time and the unraveling of a meticulously crafted truth would tell. The morning sun, usually a symbol of vibrant new beginnings in the bustling city, felt heavy and oppressive to Aisha. The business card, clutched in her hand through a sleepless night, now lay on her worn wooden table, its glossy surface a stark contrast to the humble surroundings of her small, one-room apartment. This was not a place of luxury, but one carved out of necessity, a space where every item served a purpose. The walls, once a drab beige, were now adorned with scraps of fabric she'd collected, vibrant patterns that spoke to her artistic soul, a visual symphony against the muted backdrop. Her acoustic guitar, her oldest and most trusted companion, rested in its stand in the corner, its familiar shape a comforting presence amidst the unsettling possibilities. that swirled in her mind. Doubt gnawed at her. Could this be real? A billionaire? A man of immense power and influence claiming her, a street performer with nothing but her voice and her guitar, as his long-lost granddaughter? It was a narrative plucked straight from a fantastical movie, not the gritty reality she inhabited. Yet the melody persisted in her mind, the lullaby that had drawn him to her. It was a song she had always known, a melody that felt intrinsically woven into the fabric of her being, a secret language her soul understood. She had hummed it as a child, found solace in its gentle rhythm during lonely nights, and unknowingly woven it into her street performances. Where had it come from? Her fragmented memories offered no answers, only vague, hazy images that felt more like dreams than true recollections. Aisha remembered snippets, a fleeting glimpse of a vast, sparkling blue, an overwhelming sense of warmth and comfort. A melodic hum that resonated deep within her chest. These weren't concrete memories, but rather emotional imprints, echoes of a feeling. She'd dismissed them as childhood fantasies, a byproduct of a vivid imagination seeking solace in a world that offered little. But now, in the harsh light of dawn, those ephemeral feelings took on a terrifying new significance. What if they were real? What if this man, Elijah Vance, held the key to a past she couldn't remember? A past that could redefine everything she thought she knew about herself? Fear, cold and sharp, mingled with a reluctant curiosity. The rational part of her urged caution, whispered warnings of scams and elaborate cons. But another part, a deeply buried, yearning part, ached for answers, for connection, for a sense of belonging she had never truly known. Her life had been a constant struggle for survival, a relentless battle against anonymity and poverty. The idea of a family, of a history, however impossible it seemed, was a powerful lure. She thought of her adoptive mother, Mama Grace, a woman with a heart as vast as the ocean, and hands calloused from years of hard work. Mama Grace, a retired nurse with a kind, weathered face and eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 stories, had given Aisha a roof over her head for a few crucial years during her tumultuous childhood. Mama Grace, with her rich dark skin and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, had instilled in Aisha the values of perseverance and the power of love, even when life was at its harshest. She had taught Aisha that dignity wasn't found in wealth, but in integrity and kindness. Mama Grace, who now lived in a small, assisted living facility, had often told Aisha, "Your voice. Child, that's your truth. Never let anyone dim that light." Aisha often visited Mama Grace, bringing her small gifts and singing her favorite hymns, their bond forged in love and mutual respect. The decision was agonizing, a silent battle waged within the confines of her small apartment. Ultimately, the yearning for truth, the tantalizing possibility of a forgotten past, outweighed her apprehension. She would go. She would face the billionaire. She would demand answers. Not just for herself, but for the ghost of the child she might have been. With a deep breath that barely steadied her nerves, Aisha dressed in her cleanest, most presentable clothes, a simple, dark skirt and a crisp white blouse she usually reserved for special occasions. She braided her long hair meticulously, a ritual of grounding that always brought her a sense of calm. As she left her apartment, the city's familiar roar seemed to take on a new intensity, a prelude to the unknown. The Vance Global headquarters was a monolith of polished glass and gleaming steel, a testament to raw power and unimaginable wealth. It loomed over the city like a silent sentry, its sheer scale intimidating. Aisha felt a tremor of fear as she stepped into the opulent lobby, a space that felt miles removed from her world of street corners and bus fares. The air was thick with the scent of expensive polish and the hushed murmurs of important conversations. Everything was pristine, orderly, and utterly alien. The receptionist, a woman with a perfectly coiffed afro and a serene, almost detached demeanor, looked up as Aisha approached. Her eyes, initially dismissive, widened slightly as Aisha introduced herself and mentioned Elijah Vance's name. A flicker of surprise, Then a practiced smile appeared on her lips. "Mr. Vance is expecting you," she said, her voice smooth and professional. "Please." "Follow me." Aisha was led through labyrinthine corridors, past offices teeming with busy employees, each one exuding an air of quiet efficiency. The deeper she went, the more overwhelming the silence became, broken only by the soft hum of air conditioning and the rhythmic click of her heels on the polished marble floors. Finally, she was ushered into a vast office, a space that seemed to stretch endlessly towards the horizon, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Elijah Vance stood by one of these windows, his back to her, a solitary, imposing figure silhouetted against the bright sky. The sheer grandeur of the room, the overwhelming sense of power it exuded, momentarily stole Aisha's breath. Her smallness, her insignificance, pressed in on her. He turned slowly, his gaze as intense as she remembered, fixed on her. The vulnerability she had glimpsed on the street. Corner was now replaced by an almost imperceptible guard, a hint of the formidable businessman he truly was. His eyes, though still holding that deep sorrow, also held a cautious hope, a fragile anticipation that mirrored her own. "Thank you for coming, Aisha," he said, his voice deep, resonating in the silent room. He gestured towards a plush leather chair. "Please, sit." Aisha took a seat, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt a strange mixture of awe and defiance. She was here, in his world, but she would not be intimidated. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands, "I need to understand. What makes you believe I could be your granddaughter?" Elijah walked over to his desk, picking up a framed photograph. He held it out to her. It was an image of a radiant woman, her smile bright, her eyes sparkling with life. Beside her, a little girl, no older than 4, with wide, curious eyes and a cascade of dark curls, was laughing, her tiny hands reaching out to a butterfly. The little girl in the photograph had Aisha's eyes, her nose, the curve of her smile. It was uncanny, almost terrifying. "This is my daughter, Simone, and her daughter, Seraphina," Elijah explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Seraphina, she disappeared 20 years ago from our beach estate. She was 4. He paused, his gaze fixed on Aisha's face, searching for a sign, a flicker of recognition. "The song you sang, it was a lullaby my daughter composed for Seraphina. A private melody. Only our family knew it." Aisha felt a jolt. The photograph, the undeniable resemblance, the haunting melody, the pieces, however improbable, were beginning to align, forming a terrifyingly plausible picture. I don't remember anything before I was about 5 or 6, Aisha confessed. Her voice barely a whisper, just fragments, a lot of blur. Elijah nodded, his expression softening. That would make sense. Trauma can do that. Block out the past. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Aisha, I know this is a lot to take in, but I have to know. For my peace. For my family's peace." He pulled out a legal document. "I've arranged for a DNA test. It's the only way to be absolutely certain." The mention of a DNA test brought a fresh wave of conflicting emotions. Relief that there was a definitive way to resolve this impossible situation, and fear that the results might confirm a truth too monumental to bear. Aisha looked at the photograph again, then back at Elijah. The gravity of the moment settled upon her. This wasn't just about her, it was about a family's enduring grief, a grandparent's desperate hope. "Okay," she said, her voice firming, "I'll do it. But whatever the results, I need the truth. All of it." The DNA test was conducted in a hushed, sterile clinic, the entire process handled with discreet efficiency by Elijah's personal team. The wait for the results was excruciating, each passing hour stretching into an eternity. Aisha returned to her apartment, the silence now amplified, the familiar comfort of her guitar unable to quell the storm raging within her. She tried to sing, to lose herself in the music, but the melody of the lullaby, once a source of comfort, now echoed with unsettling questions. She thought of Mama Grace, and the countless stories she had shared about finding strength in adversity. Mama Grace's unwavering belief in her, her constant encouragement to pursue her music, had been Aisha's anchor in a turbulent life. How would Mama Grace react to this impossible news? The thought of telling her, of explaining this fantastical turn of events, filled Aisha with a fresh wave of anxiety. Elijah, meanwhile, was a coiled spring of anxiety. He paced his opulent office, his gaze repeatedly drawn to the framed photograph on his desk. Seraphina, 20 years. Could it truly be her? He had clung to hope for so long, a solitary ember in the ashes of his despair, but it had always been a fragile, almost delusional hope. Now it was a tangible possibility, a wildfire threatening to consume him with its intensity. He replayed the scene in the plaza, Aisha's voice, the undeniable familiarity of the lullaby. His heart throbbed with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. He had endured 2 decades of profound grief, of a hollow existence. The thought of finding her, of finally holding his granddaughter, was almost too much to bear. It was a dream he had long buried, now resurrected with a force that threatened to shatter his carefully constructed world. 3 days later, the call came. Elijah answered it with a trembling hand, his breathing shallow. The voice on the other end was his lead investigator, Marcus Thorne, a man whose sharp intellect and unwavering loyalty had served Elijah for years. Marcus, a meticulous and stoic man in his early 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and calm, knowing eyes, had overseen countless investigations for Vance Global. His skin was a deep, rich brown, and his movements were always precise, controlled. He was a man of few words, but every word carried weight. Mr. Vance, Marcus' voice was calm, controlled. But Elijah detected a tremor of emotion beneath the professional facade. The results are in. Elijah couldn't speak, his throat tight. He simply waited, his heart hammering against his ribs. The probability of kinship is 99.99%. Marcus stated, his voice almost a whisper. Aisha is Seraphina Vance. The words hung in the air, reverberating through Elijah's office like a celestial chorus. It was real, a miracle. He dropped the phone, his legs giving out beneath him. He sank into his chair, tears, hot and unstoppable, streaming down his face. Tears of relief, of joy, of an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Seraphina, his Seraphina. She was alive. He had found her. He ran a trembling hand over the photograph, his fingers tracing the outline of the little girl's face. 20 years of pain, 20 years of agonizing uncertainty, dissolved in that single, glorious moment. The world, once a bleak landscape of sorrow, suddenly exploded with color and light. He needed to tell Aisha. He needed to hold her. He needed to make up for 2 lost decades. Aisha was sitting by her window, idly strumming her guitar, when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but she answered it with a sense of premonition. Aisha? It was Elijah's voice. Thick with emotion, it's Elijah. The results are back. It's you, Aisha. You're Seraphina. My granddaughter. The phone slipped from Aisha's grasp, clattering to the floor. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Seraphina. The name, once foreign, now resonated with an uncanny familiarity. A whisper from a long-forgotten past. A rush of fragmented images flooded her mind, the warm embrace of a strong hand, the scent of salt water, the distinct taste of fresh coconut water, a specific lullaby, the sound of her own childlike laughter mingling with an older, deeper chuckle. It wasn't a sudden, complete recall, but rather a torrent of sensations, feelings and faint echoes of sound, all converging to form a nascent understanding. It was a kaleidoscope of impressions that were profoundly hers, irrevocably linked to the name Seraphina. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the outlines of her humble room. Not tears of sorrow, but of an overwhelming, complex cocktail of emotions, shock, relief, fear, and a profound, aching joy. She was Seraphina Vance, the lost granddaughter of a billionaire. Her entire life, everything she had known, every struggle, every song, was suddenly recontextualized, viewed through the prism of this extraordinary revelation. The sense of being untethered, of always searching for something she couldn't name, finally had a name. She was found. Her first thought after the initial shock was of Mama Grace. She had to tell her. Mama Grace, who had always believed in Aisha's inherent goodness, who had taught her to find beauty in struggle. How would she react to this unbelievable turn of events? Aisha knew Mama Grace would be overjoyed for her, but she also knew the deep bond they shared would remain, unshaken by titles or wealth. The reunion was a whirlwind of emotions. Elijah arrived at Aisha's apartment within the hour, his face a mixture of joyous tears and profound relief. He enveloped her in a hug so tight it almost stole her breath, a desperate embrace that spoke of 20 years of agonizing separation. Aisha, initially stiff with shock, slowly melted into his arms, feeling a strange, unfamiliar comfort, a primal sense of belonging, the scent of his cologne. A subtle, sophisticated aroma triggered another faint memory, a warm, comforting presence. "My Seraphina," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "My little girl." The story of Seraphina Vance's disappearance and miraculous return became a global phenomenon, eclipsing every other news story. The media, once vultures, were now ravenous for every detail, every tear, every word exchanged between the billionaire and his long-lost granddaughter. The Vance estate, once a silent monument to grief, was suddenly alive with a cautious celebration. Aisha, or rather Seraphina, was thrust into a world of unimaginable luxury, a stark contrast to the life she had known. Designer clothes replaced her worn attire, gourmet meals replaced street food, and a sprawling mansion replaced her small apartment. But amidst the opulence, she felt a profound sense of displacement. She was Seraphina Vance, but she was also Aisha, the street performer. The two identities clashed, creating a bewildering internal struggle. She loved Elijah, felt an undeniable connection to him, a burgeoning love for the grandfather she had lost. He doted on her, lavishing her with gifts, trying to make up for lost time. He watched her every move, listened to her every word, as if afraid she would vanish again. His love was overwhelming, almost suffocating in its intensity. He introduced her to his closest confidants, his business partners, his inner circle, all of whom greeted her with carefully orchestrated smiles and polite, yet curious gazes. They were gracious, welcoming, but Aisha felt a subtle undercurrent of skepticism, of unspoken questions in their eyes. She understood. Her sudden appearance, after 2 decades, was extraordinary, almost unbelievable. The estate, with its sprawling gardens and private beach, should have been a sanctuary, but it felt like a gilded cage. The silence, once a welcome respite from the city's clamor, now felt deafening, echoing with the ghosts of a past she couldn't fully access. She missed the vibrant chaos of the streets, the anonymity of the crowd, the raw honesty of her music. She missed her independence, the fierce self-reliance that had defined her existence. She missed Mama Grace, her grounded wisdom and comforting presence. She made sure to visit Mama Grace regularly, the older woman overjoyed and bewildered by the turn of events, showering Aisha with blessings and quiet advice. "Remember who you are, child," Mama Grace would always say, her eyes twinkling. "Wealth can change your circumstances, but it doesn't change your soul." One evening, unable to bear the oppressive silence of the mansion, Aisha wandered down to the private beach. The moon, a silver sliver in the inky sky, cast a ghostly glow on the restless ocean. The waves, a rhythmic whisper, seemed to beckon her. She sat on the sand, her bare feet sinking into the cool grains, and pulled out her guitar. She began to play, the familiar chords a soothing balm to her troubled soul. She sang the lullaby, the melody now imbued with a new, profound meaning. As her voice soared into the night, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since her return to the Vance world. She was Aisha, the singer, and that identity, the one she had forged through hardship and resilience, was as real, if not more real, than the one of Seraphina Vance. Elijah, drawn by the haunting melody, found her there, a solitary figure under the moonlight, her voice a beacon in the darkness. He stood for a moment watching her, a profound sense of awe and gratitude filling him. She was truly a miracle. He approached her slowly, careful not to startle her. When she finished, he sat beside her in the sand, the coolness of the night air a stark contrast to the warmth of his emotions. "It's beautiful, Seraphina," he said, his voice soft, "just like your mother." She had a gift for music, too. Aisha looked at him, a complex swirl of emotions in her eyes. "It's Aisha," she corrected him gently, her voice firm. "For now, please call me Aisha. Seraphina, it's a beautiful name, but it doesn't feel like me yet, not truly." Elijah's smile faltered slightly, a shadow of disappointment crossing his face, but he nodded, understanding. "Of course, Aisha," he said, his voice still gentle. "Whatever makes you comfortable." He reached out, taking her hand, his grip warm and strong. "I know this is a lot, a huge adjustment, but I promise you we'll take it one step at a time. And we'll find out what happened to you, every detail." His eyes hardened, a flicker of his old resolute self returning. "I won't rest until I know the truth." Aisha looked at the vast, dark ocean stretching before them, its secrets held tightly in its embrace. The truth. That was what she craved more than anything. Not the wealth, not the luxury, but the clarity, the understanding of her past. Who had taken her? Why? And how had she survived all these years? Without a single memory of her real family? The reunion, while joyous, had also opened up a Pandora's box of unanswered questions, a labyrinth of shadows that needed to be illuminated. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential revelations that could shatter her fragile sense of self. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She had a grandfather who believed in her, a family searching for answers, and a melody that had guided her home. The story of Aisha, the street performer, and Seraphina, the lost heiress, had just begun to truly unfold. The immediate aftermath of Aisha's, or rather Seraphina's, discovery was a maelstrom of activity, a relentless torrent that threatened to drown her. Elijah, with the full force of Vance Global at his command, immediately launched a full-scale investigation into her disappearance. Marcus Thorne, the sharp, taciturn head of security, was now dedicated solely to uncovering the truth behind Seraphina's abduction. His team, a silent, efficient force, began sifting through every detail of the original police report, re-interviewing old witnesses, and cross-referencing every lead that had gone cold 2 decades ago. Elijah, consumed by a fierce protectiveness, insisted that Aisha remain at the estate, shielded from the relentless media scrutiny and the potential dangers that might still lurk in the shadows of her past. But the luxurious confines of the Vance estate, designed for comfort and security, felt more like a gilded cage to Aisha. The suffocating silence, broken only by the whispers of the ocean, and the distant hum of the mansion's systems, was a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the city she knew. She missed the rhythmic pulse of urban life, the cacophony of street sounds that had once been her constant companion. She missed the fleeting connections with strangers drawn to her music, the raw honesty of her performances. Most of all, she missed her independence, the fierce self-reliance that had been her shield and sword in a world that offered little. She was Seraphina Vance, the lost heiress, but she was also Aisha, the street performer, and the two identities wrestled within her, creating an unsettling dissonance. Elijah, in his earnest desire to reconnect with his granddaughter, lavished her with gifts, designer clothes, shimmering jewels, access to private jets, luxuries that had once been distant fantasies were now her everyday reality. He tried to fill the void of 2 lost decades with material possessions, believing they could somehow compensate for the immense loss they had both suffered. But Aisha felt a profound disconnect from this world of endless indulgence. The silk dresses felt alien on her skin, the sparkling diamonds heavy on her fingers. Her true comfort lay in the familiar worn wood of her guitar, the calloused tips of her fingers on its strings. She spent hours in a secluded part of the estate, a small, overgrown garden tucked away behind a sprawling guest wing, playing her music. Her melodies, a solitary bridge between her two disparate lives. She often wondered if her biological mother, Simone, had also found solace in this garden. One afternoon, as Aisha practiced a new song, a melancholic tune about forgotten dreams, Marcus Thorne approached her, his presence a quiet interruption. He held a thick file, its contents a stark reminder of the grim reality of her past. "Aisha," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man of his bearing. "We've made some progress. It's not easy news." Aisha's heart tightened. She braced herself. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady. Marcus sat beside her on a stone bench, the scent of blooming jasmine momentarily softening the gravity of the moment. "We revisited the initial reports," he explained, his gaze distant, as if recalling the scene. "The original investigation concluded it was likely an accidental drowning. The currents here can be unpredictable even for adults." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "But that was always a theory that Elijah refused to accept. And he was right to doubt it. We found a discrepancy. A small, almost imperceptible detail missed by the original team." He opened the file, revealing a grainy photograph. It was an aerial shot of the beach taken shortly after Seraphina's disappearance. "See this?" Marcus pointed to a faint, almost invisible mark in the sand, partially obscured by the tide. "It's a drag mark, very faint, but it's there. Consistent with something being pulled from the sand, just before the tide came in." A shiver ran down Aisha's spine. A drag mark, not an accidental drowning. She had been taken. "Who?" she whispered, the word a raw, desperate plea. Marcus closed the file, his expression grim. "We don't know yet, but this mark, combined with the fact that no body was ever found, confirms that Seraphina was abducted. We also found records of a small, unregistered boat that was sighted in the area around that time. It was dismissed as irrelevant then, but now it's a strong lead." The revelation sent a fresh wave of fear and anger through Aisha. Her life, once defined by the present, was now inextricably linked to a past she couldn't fully recall, a past that held sinister secrets. She had survived against all odds, but the lingering question of who and why gnawed at her. She felt a burning need to know, a fierce determination to uncover the truth. Not just for herself, but for the innocent child who had been snatched away. As the days turned into weeks, Aisha found herself drawn to a specific part of the estate, a sprawling, untamed section of garden that had been left untouched for years. It was here, amidst the overgrown bushes and neglected flower beds, that she found an old, weather-beaten wooden swing set. It was small, clearly designed for a child, and as she touched the rusted chains, a fragmented memory surfaced, the feeling of soaring through the air, her laughter echoing, a warm hand pushing her higher. It was a fleeting glimpse, a whisper of a forgotten joy, but it sent a pang of longing through her. Elijah, noticing her growing attachment to the forgotten garden, decided to restore it. He brought in landscapers, meticulously recreating the vibrant, whimsical garden that had once been Seraphina's private sanctuary. As the workers cleared away the overgrowth, they uncovered a small, wooden music box half buried in the soil. It was intricately carved with whimsical animals, and when Elijah carefully wound it, a delicate, familiar melody filled the air. It was the lullaby. The very same tune Aisha had sung, the song that had brought them together. Aisha stared at the music box, a profound sense of wonder and connection washing over her. This wasn't just a coincidence, it was a tangible link to her forgotten past, a silent confirmation that the little girl named Seraphina was truly her. The music box became her most cherished possession, a tangible anchor to a world she was slowly beginning to remember. It was a bridge between the Aisha of the streets and the Seraphina of the estate. The investigation continued, relentless and methodical. Marcus's team discovered a network of small, independent adoption agencies that operated under the radar, often dealing in questionable placements. One particular agency, long since defunct, had a suspicious record of handling cases involving children with no verifiable birth records. The trail was cold, convoluted, but Marcus was a man who thrived on complex puzzles. He began to suspect a larger, more organized operation, not just a random abduction. The drag mark, the boat, the lack of a body, it all pointed to a carefully planned operation. Amidst the intensity of the investigation, a different kind of connection began to form between Aisha and Elijah. He started spending more time with her, not just as a grieving grandfather, but as a man genuinely trying to understand the woman she had become. He listened to her stories of the streets, her struggles, her triumphs, her dreams of using her music to inspire others. He saw the resilience, the strength, the independent spirit that had allowed her to survive and thrive in a harsh world. He began to appreciate the unique blend of Seraphina's innocent joy and Aisha's street-hardened wisdom. He learned that Seraphina was not just a memory, but a living, breathing woman with her own identity. One evening, as they sat on the patio overlooking the ocean, a rare moment of quiet intimacy, Aisha shared a particularly poignant memory from her childhood. "There was a woman," she began, her voice soft, distant. "She was kind, but also distant. She taught me to cook, to sew. She sang sometimes, and her voice was beautiful, but her eyes always looked sad. I think she was the first person I lived with after the blur." Elijah listened intently, his expression unreadable. "Do you remember her name?" Aisha shook her head. "No, just a feeling, a sense of longing." The conversation opened a new avenue for Marcus. He began searching for records of women who had taken in young, unregistered children around the time of Seraphina's disappearance, focusing on individuals with a history of fostering or questionable adoptions. The net was wide, but Marcus was persistent. A breakthrough came weeks later. A retired social worker, now suffering from advanced dementia, had mentioned a case to her caretaker, a recurring memory of a sad-eyed woman who had shown up with a young, traumatized child years ago seeking help but then disappearing. The social worker had always felt uneasy about the situation. The caretaker, remembering the news of Seraphina's return, had contacted Marcus' team. The woman's name, retrieved from the social worker's fragmented notes, was Evelyn Dubois. Evelyn Dubois. The name resonated with a strange, unsettling familiarity in Aisha's mind. She hadn't remembered it, but the feeling it evoked was undeniably real. Marcus' team tracked Evelyn to a small, secluded house in a remote rural area, far from the bustling city, far from the ocean. It was a humble dwelling, almost hidden amongst dense foliage, a stark contrast to the Grand Vance estate. Elijah insisted on accompanying Aisha and Marcus to Evelyn's house. He refused to let her face this potential revelation alone. The journey was long, the anticipation a palpable entity in the car. Aisha felt a knot of dread tightening in her stomach, mingled with a burning curiosity. Was this the woman from her fragmented memories? The woman with the sad eyes? As they approached the dilapidated house, a figure emerged from the shadows of the porch. An elderly woman, her face deeply lined, her eyes holding a profound sadness, slowly walked towards them. Her skin was a rich, dark brown, almost the color of polished wood, and her silver hair was pulled back in a loose bun, strands escaping to frame her weary face. It was Evelyn Dubois. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. Recognition, swift and undeniable, slammed into her. The shape of the woman's nose, the gentle curve of her lips, the haunting sorrow in her eyes. It was the woman from her earliest, most fragmented memories. The woman who had given her a temporary home, taught her the quiet rhythms of life, and unknowingly kept her safe. "Evelyn Dubois?" Marcus asked, his voice firm but respectful. Evelyn's eyes, though clouded with age and regret, widened as they landed on Aisha. A gasp escaped her lips. "Seraphina?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "My little Seraphina," Aisha stepped forward, drawn by an invisible force. "You know me," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and accusation. "You knew me as Seraphina," Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, tracing paths down her wrinkled cheeks. "Oh, my sweet child," she sobbed, reaching out a trembling hand. "I knew you would come back. I always knew." The scene was charged with raw emotion. Elijah stood back, allowing Aisha to confront her past, his heart aching for the lost years, but filled with a profound sense of relief that the truth was finally beginning to unravel. Evelyn, with a heavy heart and a flood of tears, began to tell her story. She had been a struggling seamstress living in poverty when her younger brother, a desperate man caught in the clutches of debt, had approached her with a proposition. He was involved with a group, he explained, a network that found children for wealthy, desperate families unable to conceive. They had given him a child, a little girl, snatched from a beach, and he needed a place to hide her temporarily. He had promised Evelyn a substantial sum of money, enough to clear her debts and secure her future. Evelyn, blinded by desperation and a misguided loyalty to her brother, had reluctantly agreed. "I didn't know the truth then," Evelyn cried. Her voice choked with sobs. "He told me she was an orphan, abandoned. He said he was saving her from a terrible life. I swear, I never would have taken her if I knew the truth. But the truth, once revealed, had been a heavy burden." Evelyn had witnessed the child's distress, the haunting sadness in her eyes, the way she clung to a small, wooden music box that played a melancholic lullaby. She had seen the missing child reports, the frantic pleas from the Vance family. Her conscience had tormented her. She wanted to return Seraphina, but her brother, a dangerous man, had threatened her family, if she dared to interfere. He had assured her that the child would be placed with a loving, wealthy family, that she would be safe and well cared for, albeit under a new identity. Evelyn had kept Seraphina for a short time, caring for her as best she could, trying to soothe the child's unspoken grief. She had noticed the girl's fascination with music, her natural inclination to hum the lullaby. She had witnessed the child's quiet resilience, her remarkable ability to adapt. When her brother finally came to take Seraphina away, Evelyn had been powerless to stop him. She had watched, heartbroken, as the little girl, oblivious to the cruel twist of fate that was separating her from her true family, was driven away in a nondescript car. Evelyn had spent the next 20 years consumed by guilt, tormented by the secret she had kept, never daring to contact the Vance family, fearing both her brother's wrath and the legal repercussions. She had lived a solitary, remorseful existence, a prisoner of her own complicity. Aisha listened, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her, anger at the cruel deception, pity for the woman who had been trapped in a web of her brother's making, and a profound, overwhelming sense of clarity. The pieces of her fragmented past were finally coming together, forming a coherent, albeit painful narrative. The sad-eyed woman, the lullaby, the unexplained yearning, it all made sense now. Elijah, his face grim, turned to Marcus. "Find her brother," he commanded, his voice laced with cold fury. "Find every single person involved in this. I want them all brought to justice." The revelation of Evelyn Dubois' involvement and the chilling truth of a planned abduction sent shockwaves through the Vance family and the public. The media, already obsessed with the story, now descended with renewed fervor, broadcasting every detail of Evelyn's confession. The world watched, horrified, as the truth of Seraphina's disappearance unfolded, revealing a dark underbelly of a child trafficking network. Aisha, now more than ever, understood the importance of her identity as Seraphina Vance. It wasn't just about reclaiming her past. It was about exposing a criminal network, about preventing other children from suffering the same fate. She felt a new sense of purpose, a quiet determination to use her voice, her story, to bring about justice. The moral lesson was clear: secrets, however well kept, always find a way to surface, and the choices we make, however small, can have profound, far-reaching consequences. The truth, however painful, was ultimately liberating. And for Aisha, the journey to becoming Seraphina was just beginning. The road ahead was long, fraught with emotional challenges and the complexities of legal battles. But she was no longer alone. She had a family, a name, and a mission. The revelation of Evelyn Dubois' role and the chilling confirmation of a deliberate abduction tore open old wounds for Elijah and ignited a fierce resolve in Aisha. The initial wave of joyous reunion had given way to a storm of legal and emotional complexities. Marcus Thorne, armed with Evelyn's confession and the newly discovered evidence, orchestrated a relentless pursuit of the shadowy organization responsible. His team, working tirelessly, began to peel back layers of deception, tracing financial transactions and coded communications that pointed to a vast, sophisticated network dealing in illegal adoptions and, chillingly, child trafficking. The brother, a man named Silas Dubois, was quickly apprehended, his capture a significant breakthrough. Silas, a hardened man with a cruel glint in his eyes and a history of petty crimes, quickly crumbled under interrogation, revealing names and locations. Desperate to mitigate his own sentence, Aisha, now fully embracing her identity as Seraphina, felt a profound responsibility to see justice served. She worked closely with Marcus, poring over documents, trying to trigger more memories, to piece together the fragmented puzzle of her lost years. The initial shock of Evelyn's involvement had softened into a complex mix of understanding and lingering resentment. Evelyn, now facing legal repercussions for her complicity, expressed profound remorse, a sorrow that felt genuine. Aisha found herself visiting Evelyn in jail, not out of forgiveness yet, but out of a desperate need for answers, to understand the woman who had unknowingly held a piece of her past. Their conversations were difficult, laden with unspoken pain, but each meeting chipped away at the wall that had surrounded Aisha's earliest memories, revealing more vivid details of her time with Evelyn, and the subsequent move to a foster home where she had found Mama Grace. The investigation led Marcus' team to a reclusive, seemingly philanthropic couple in a distant state, Dr. Aris Thorne and Eleanor Thorne. Dr. Aris Thorne, a renowned, albeit controversial, geneticist known for his work in fertility, and his wife, Eleanor, a meticulously groomed woman who presented herself as a tireless advocate for children's welfare, had long maintained an impenetrable facade of respectability. They were the masterminds behind the operation, using Dr. Thorne's medical connections to identify desperate, wealthy clients and Eleanor's charitable foundations as a front for their illicit activities. Their sprawling estate, a fortress of high walls and surveillance cameras, was where many of the abducted children, including Seraphina, had been processed before being placed with new families, their identities meticulously erased. The thought of being processed sent a chill down Aisha's spine. It felt dehumanizing, reducing her childhood to a mere transaction. Marcus, with Elijah's full backing, secured a warrant and raided the Thorne estate. The evidence they found was overwhelming, meticulously kept ledgers detailing payments, false birth certificates, and, most damningly, a hidden room filled with personal effects belonging to dozens of abducted children, including a small, worn doll that Aisha faintly remembered clutching during her early, disoriented years. The doll, a simple rag doll with one button eye, now sat on the table in Elijah's office, a silent testament to her trauma. The Thornes were apprehended, their carefully constructed lives crumbling around them. The ensuing trial was a media circus, a gripping saga that captivated the nation. Aisha, now Seraphina Vance, bravely testified, her voice clear and strong, recounting her fragmented memories and the impact of her lost past. She spoke not just for herself, but for all the forgotten children, for the families whose lives had been shattered by the Thornes' greed. Her testimony was powerful, painting a vivid picture of stolen innocence and enduring trauma. The Thornes, despite their efforts to project an image of benevolent figures, were exposed as ruthless traffickers, their philanthropic veneer ripped away to reveal a core of chilling depravity. They were convicted on multiple counts, their sentences long and uncompromising. Justice, in its slow, deliberate march, had finally caught up to them. Amidst the legal battles and the emotional turmoil, A deep and enduring love blossomed between Aisha and Elijah. He was no longer just the stoic billionaire he was her grandfather, a man whose fierce love had defied 20 years of absence and despair. He spent hours listening to her play her guitar, his eyes filled with a quiet pride. He shared stories of Simone, her mother, a vibrant woman whose passion for life mirrored Aisha's own. He showed her old photo albums, filling in the blanks of her childhood, helping her piece together a life she had been denied. He delighted in her laughter, a sound he had thought he would never hear again. He saw not just Seraphina, the lost child, but Aisha, the resilient artist, the compassionate woman who had found her voice against all odds. Aisha, in turn, found in Elijah the anchor she had always craved. His unwavering support, his unconditional love, provided a sense of belonging she had never known. She learned about the vastness of his empire, the intricate workings of Vance Global, and discovered his profound dedication to philanthropy, a side of him the public rarely saw. She started to understand the weight of his responsibilities, the burdens he carried, and felt a newfound respect for his strength and resilience. Their bond, forged in tragedy and cemented by truth, became the bedrock of their new lives. However, the path to healing was not without its challenges. The trauma of her abduction, the years of uncertainty, left deep emotional scars. Aisha struggled with nightmares, flashes of unsettling images, and a lingering sense of mistrust. Elijah, with the guidance of top therapists, ensured she received the best care. But he also understood that true healing would be a long, personal journey. He learned to give her space, to respect her need for independence, recognizing that her self-reliance, born of hardship, was an integral part of who she was. One day, Aisha expressed a desire to return to the streets, not to perform for money, but to sing for those who still struggled, to share her story, to offer hope. Elijah, initially hesitant, understanding her deep need to connect with her past life, agreed. He arranged for a small, private concert in the plaza where they had first reconnected. The event was humble, unannounced, a stark contrast to the grand galas Elijah usually attended. Aisha stood there, her guitar in hand, her familiar street clothes a comforting presence. She looked out at the small crowd that had gathered, a mixture of curious onlookers and old acquaintances from her street performing days. She saw Mama Grace in the front row, her eyes shining with pride, and Marcus Thorne, his usual stoicism softened by a rare smile. And beside them, Elijah, his gaze filled with unwavering love. She sang. Her voice, rich and resonant, filled the air, weaving a tapestry of pain, resilience, and hope. She sang the lullaby, but this time, it was no longer a song of loss, but a melody of reunion, of finding her way home. She spoke of her journey, of the darkness she had faced, and the light she had found. She spoke of the power of truth, the importance of love, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. She didn't shy away from the hard truths, the years of struggle, the anger she had felt. But she also spoke of forgiveness, of the slow, arduous path towards healing, and the profound realization that a past, however painful, does not define the future. The crowd listened, captivated, tears streaming down many faces. When she finished, a wave of applause, heartfelt and genuine, washed over her. It was a moment of profound catharsis, a bridge between her two lives, a declaration of who she was, Seraphina Vance, the survivor, the artist, the beacon of hope. Truth, however painful, always sets you free. Aisha's journey underscored that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in connection, love, and the strength of one's spirit. The choices made by individuals, from Evelyn's initial complicity to Elijah's relentless search, had shaped countless lives, demonstrating the profound impact of individual actions. The documentary ended not with a grand statement, but with a quiet, powerful image Aisha, now confident in her dual identity, standing on the beach, the vast ocean stretching before her. She was no longer haunted by its silence, but found solace in its endless horizon.
The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and share so others get to watch too. Subscribe for more.